Hey everybody, I am Tintin, that's T-I-N as in newsworthy, T-I-M as in musical. Tonight's topic was a special request from Katana Ray at Queens of the Week, one of my favorite YouTube channels. This week at Queens of the Week, they have been discussing masculinity. So, like in dating profiles, when people say they're only attracted to, masculine men or quote-unquote straight-acting men or, no femmes, what is it that they are talking about? What is the measure of a man? Which I don't think is about dick size. What I want to do right off the bat is just to clarify how I define terms, my own sort of base assumptions. There is sex, which is biological, male, female, or intersex. Then there is gender identity, which is how we identify as individuals, as men, as women, as trans, as something kind of outside the binary. And then there is gender, which I think of as the social construct of gender. Broadly, in the culture, how do we define masculinity and femininity, and how are they kind of created in the world? When I say social construct, I don't mean that gender isn't real, but more so, how does this thing called gender, which I don't think necessarily has any sort of fundamental or biological or essential, origin beyond the society and beyond the culture, how does it come to be something that we think of as kind of a fundamental fact about the world? How does that idea get instilled and recreated day to day to day? I think that gender is, there's a performative element to gender, and by that I don't mean that we go out into the world every day like, am I going to perform as a girl or am I going to perform as a boy? Obviously some of us do sometimes, but more so that unconsciously all of the decisions that we make about how to present ourselves to the world, how to dress, without our even thinking about it, reinforce the ideas that we have around what it means to be a man versus what it means to be a woman, which is generally thought of as a binary. There are some of us who self-consciously try to show variation between and along that binary, but, in the dominant culture, gender usually ends up getting assigned as men or as women, masculinity or femininity. And then I think what we come to associate with women and femininity, we tend in this culture to devalue, to demonize or pathologize, and what we associate with men or masculinity, we tend to sort of exalt or privilege. Now, I also think that what those characteristics are shifts historically. For instance, there was a time in history when it was considered perfectly normal and desirable and ideal for men to wear wigs. Wigs were part of the dominant masculinity of the time. So I think that shows that what gender is shifts historically. Part of the way that homophobia or heterosexism, heteronormativity, I think that system is really closely linked with patriarchy. A lot of what the culture reviles about gay men, for instance, is the ways that they are seen to deviate from dominant or traditional masculinity. And unfortunately, I think a lot of gay men have internalized that. Sort of hating on femme people, or what is thought of as stereotypical, like, gay behavior. I think that it's true to a certain extent that it's internalized homophobia. I also think, though, that it is internalized misogyny. As gay men, we exist in a culture that is also patriarchal. Sometimes, when you experienced oppression in one area, there is this tendency then to exert the privilege that you have in another, or kind of grasp onto that to oppress others. All of the anxious kind of jokes we make about how gross women's bodies are and female anatomy and vaginas, I think that there's really only kind of one step from that, and then the violence that we commit through our words against men who remind us that, vaginas exist. A lot of the harassment and a lot of the bullying that I did experience, most of it happened when I was younger, sort of middle school age, so at a time when I really was not thinking at all about sort of sexuality or, hooking up or who I was going to want to sleep with. So it was 100% about, gender expression. Really, it's about being, a faggy little gender deviant boy. the policing of gender expression, not necessarily about, sexuality. For a long time, it was very important to me to expand upon, complicate our notions of gender and masculinity in particular. So kind of drawing out the femininity within masculinity, talking about multiple masculinities, expanding the boundaries of what masculinity can be thought of as, and trying to reclaim it for some more feminized expressions or more feminine spaces. I still think that that is really important work, and there are people that are doing that in ways that I think are really cool. Some of my favorite projects are, my friend Randy has a web series called 50 Faggots that I highly recommend. I will link it. Or there's things like, that book project that Mike Ruiz, the photographer, has been doing, trying to expand the definition of like real man, quote unquote, and show different images of that, and, unpack the ideas that we've received about, like what makes a real man. I'm glad that projects like that are starting to happen. For me, though, like more and more, it's become less important to reimagine and claim masculinity and to say I am a real man or a real man can look like this and all of that. It's kind of like some people when they get called anti-American for supporting immigrants or gay people or something, or they get called anti-American for not supporting a war, for engaging in public protest. They like to say, no, this is what an American looks like. America is gay people, is immigrants, is protest. I think it's really important that people do that. I don't personally identify that strongly with, being American or with the idea of like supporting the state. So I think it takes all of those kinds to complicate the conversation around gender. For me right now, I'm just kind of like, fuck masculinity altogether. I don't care if you see me as masculine or not. I also think it's kind of a tricky thing because sometimes what ends up happening is we do expand our ideas about what it is acceptable to think of as masculinity, and eventually that just gets privileged along with all of the other qualities that are associated with men, and maybe something else is thought of as too feminine and something else is vilified. And so I think it's really hard work to take apart the entire structure, and I don't know how we do that. I think that that's part of how the social construct of gender works, is that it's insidious, and everything that we try to do to challenge it kind of eventually gets folded in. Y'all who are out there and are in a part of that struggle, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for being you. And I think that's all I have to say tonight. Much love to you all. Talk to you soon. Bye.